COVID. So, you know, I'm glad I'm finally caught up with things, and I'm really glad to be doing this tonight. So appreciate everyone coming out.
Yeah, we're glad you're here, Kevin. And to everyone on the call, I'll just reiterate same thing we had last time. Feel free to pop any questions in the chat or come off mute and ask. And yeah, Kevin is here. This is part 2 of our mushroom webinar series. And yeah, we'll just dive right into it. Kevin, let me know if you can't share the screen or anything.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, I'm Kevin Melman. I own a FUNJ Shrooming Company in Burlington, Vermont, the North Country. And I've been running this farm for a few years. I just, you know, I feel like I've learned a lot of things, many of it the hard way, and I really like sharing. So you guys don't have to deal with that by yourselves, you know, if you choose to get into mushroom farming. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of good business information in this half of the webinar series. So yeah, we can get right into it. So just kind of some basics. Let me see, I'm going to minimize these screens. There we go. So just kind of introductory stuff. I feel like I learned really fast that mushroom farming is a constant balance of science and intuition. So that was kind of part of why I got into it, was because science and art are 2 huge passions of mine. And I really like that I can kind of intermingle them with mushroom farming. So, you know, there's definitely a lot of, you know, I'd say like more of a majority of business to farm labor stuff. And, you know, it's always a learning process with mushroom farming. As much as you want to read or learn or get mentors, there's things you have to learn the hard way. But, you know, there's always, you know, new things to try out. It's a young industry, and there's a lot of exciting things going on. In 2017, I have written down at the bottom that there were only 226 mushroom farms in the United States. I wouldn't be surprised if now it's probably closer to, you know, twice that. I don't have the exact number, but it's definitely on the rise. Our farm started in 2019, so, you know, and I've definitely seen quite a few open up in recent years. But, you know, as you all know, you know, you guys are farmers, so you know, farming is challenging. There's often very rewarding, and with mushroom farming, it's unique in that it has a very rapid crop cycle. So if you screw something up one week, you know, you have an opportunity within a few weeks to, you know, change everything up. So and then lastly, you know, kind of back to that science and art end of things, it's heavily reliant on technology. Because we try to keep things precise so you can be consistent year round, even in the dead of winter right now. But, you know, there's also some farmers who choose to just kind of play things by ear a little bit and just, you know, let the mushrooms speak to them, so to speak, you know, just kind of, you know, run their different exhausts and humidifiers and lights and everything based off of how the mushrooms are looking. So, you know, that's kind of the intuitive part of it. So, the main focus for today is going to be in 4 sections, and you're going to start off with just kind of the day-to-day operations, how I schedule my week, and, you know, y'all can take whatever you want from that to make it suit yourselves, but it just kind of show you how I do it, and then we're going to do sales. You know, that's the best part, where you actually make money off of all your hard work at the farm. Marketing, which is kind of going to really tie into, you know, increasing your sales, growing your presence, so people come to you instead of you having to hunt down customers. And then lastly, competition. You know, you're probably gonna run into that, and you know, how to make things work and how to play nice and still make a profit at the end of the day. So the basic workflow at a specialty mushroom farm is you start off with sterilizing your substrate. So actually, well, so yeah, you got substrate sterilization, then you inoculate your clean substrate, then you let it incubate for about 10 days, and then you bring it to your fruiting room, let the mushrooms grow out, harvest them, store them, and then sell them. So I keep things staggered, but we're going to talk about it in a second. So here's a little kind of idealized facility map, just kind of sectioned out. So we're going to start right where the gold star is at the bottom right. So that section is going to be where kind of everything begins with sterilization. So you have your raw materials, your hardwood fuel pellets, your soybean hulls, all your bags and everything, your sterilizer. So you start off your week by making new bags, put them in the sterilizer, clean them up, and then after everything cools off in your lab, where you follow that arrow into the lab and inoculation section, you then kind of let it cool off in sterile air, and then you inoculate with your spawn. And then you want to have your incubation room kind of next to that, so you can cart everything over into your incubation space. And kind of a note that I have written here is that you want your incubation to be relatively similar size to your fruiting chamber, and that's just because you're going to have blocks in there at different stages of growth. So not everything that goes in one week is going to come out the next. You're going to have maybe on a 2-week cycle, which I'll show you in a second. But then you're going to cart everything from incubation once they're ready, in about after 10 days about, into your fruiting space. Everything's going to grow up in there, and then you want losing a little bit of circularity to this workflow here, but you want some a place to bring the waste out, where you're going to clean you're going to clean your fruiting room every single week, and you're going to put new stuff in there. So you want it to be relatively clean, as pristine as possible. Another note I have written down is, if you have the potential to put floor drains in, absolutely take it. No farm I've been in touch with has been upset about having their floor drains. I've definitely envied them for it though, because I don't. I have to wet back any schmutz up in my fruiting rooms. And then next to your fruiting chamber, you want your processing and storage space. Pick your mushrooms. Everything's about walking as little as you need to the next process point. So you bring your fresh mushrooms out to your processing tables, and have your cooler for storage nearby. And then, you take everything out on delivery days, package them up. You want all this to be close to, your exit. And then I also have in the middle just kind of the flex space, office, bathroom, other storage. You're going to find that you're going to have other junk. So, and then obviously part of that can be vertical storage. I definitely, if you have the vertical space, pallet racks are your best friend. Boxes, raw materials, etc. So when I first made a schedule like this a few years ago, just kind of in preparation for my farm, I was looking at it recently, and I was like, wow, I was so off. But I can say that this is more realistic to how it actually plays out. One caveat is that I sterilize 2 batches a week. For the sake of simplicity, this schedule is just going to be, you sterilize once a week, inoculate once a week, put things into incubation. You do everything once a week. You can get away with doing that if you have a large sterilizer. I could upgrade to a bigger one, but I choose to just do it twice a week, instead of having to buy a whole new sterilizer. So, okay, Monday, you sterilize your first batch. Tuesday, little snowflake, that just symbolizes you moved your sterilizer to your lab and let it cool down in a sterile area. On Wednesday, you inoculate your mushrooms. I just did that before this presentation today. And then you cart your freshly inoculated mushrooms into your incubation chamber. And then they sit there for about 10 days. And then kind of below that, you can see as the next week starts, you have some mushrooms in incubation, and then you already are sterilizing your next batch, and yada, yada, yada. You do the same process there. So after your first batch's incubation is up, you move it to the fruiting room. And I hope you can see my cursor because I realize things can get confusing without like a pointer here, but yeah, so everything fruits for about 10 days. And, I have the harvest kind of overlapping because you're not going to be harvesting it all on one day. You might have some days where you do the majority of it, but it's going to be kind of coming in over like, a few days. And so while you're harvesting that batch, you have another batch fruiting actively, just kind of baby mushrooms ready to come in the next week. And that way you have fresh product to go out every single week. And you do this ad nauseum, and you have a mushroom farm. So that's kind of just the staggering the schedule. And this is kind of your meat and potato slide here, cost and profit. So I sell the organic oyster mushrooms I grow for about $10 a pound wholesale to restaurants and grocery stores. That's kind of a pretty common price point you see for small organic mushroom farms. Sometimes it's a little bit more, up to 12, sometimes a little less, down to 8. But it's based off the cost of goods, which is important. And then also I try to keep it competitive as well, because I do know there are some other farms around me. So the cost of goods for one block, one 10-pound organic mushroom block, you got 2 pounds of organic soybean hull pellets in there, $1.18, 2 pounds of fuel pellets, hardwood, 27 cents. About a third a pound of spawn. I buy it, so it's more expensive, so it's $1.10. Some people do 0.1 pounds, some people go up to half a pound. I like a third. Pretty much, more will make them sit in incubation for less time, but it works for me. If you make your own spawn, that drops down quite a bit. So that could be something you choose to do. The bag that contains all the substrate, 60 cents. All the electricity for sterilizing and inoculating, about 50 cents. And then the labor to actually fill your bags, sterilize them, inoculate them, initiate harvest, the whole process. I have $1.97 for if your labor is 50 an hour, up to $2.63 per bag, per block, if you're doing $20 an hour. And total cost of goods, excluding your fixed costs such as rent or mortgage or salaries, is about $5.62 to $6.28 per block. So those are some important numbers that we're going to keep focused on. So to get to that, how much do I sell each pound of mushrooms? That big question. We're going to calculate just the gross profit margin. So this excludes the fixed costs. Like I said, this is just the cost of goods for each, each of our main products, which are these blocks pretty much. So you hope that you have the max amount of mushrooms grow out of each block. Generally, they grow anywhere from 2 to 3 pounds of mushrooms. So, there's just a little calculation that we're using. So assuming that you have kind of a bummer week and your blocks are giving you a low harvest of 2 pounds, and let's say your cost of goods have gone up, labor is expensive and electricity is expensive. This is kind of your, low end profit. So you get $20 off of that one block you made. The block cost you $6.28, and then that net you divide by 20, so you get a 68% profit margin. And assuming things are looking really good, get really huge harvest, 3 pounds, and your cost of goods are super cheap. That gives you an 81% profit margin. So, again, it's important that, you're going to have labor you're paying for cleaning and other farm tasks that aren't necessarily related to creating these blocks. Then there's also salaries, or, all the fixed costs. Then lastly, there's also loss that is not considered here. Some farmers will chalk loss up to as high as 10%, and that could just be an average, because some weeks you might lose a third of your crop, some weeks you might lose nothing. And you could lose it at any point in incubation, you could lose it in fruiting, you can lose it after you harvested it. So These are some important just kind of things to consider. This model is not perfect. It's just kind of a basic. But even with all that, it gives you some wiggle room with such a high margin here, like almost 70 to 80%. So last week we had some questions about buying in blocks instead of making them yourself. Totally valid. I know plenty of farms who make good money off of just buying in blocks every month, and at that point, each pound of mushrooms goes from $1.87 to $3.14 cost of goods, all the way up to $3 to $5 cost of goods. So it's about 40% higher cost of goods. Your margins than 30 to 50% if you're selling. It's going up to 30, going down to 30 to 50% margin as opposed to 70 to 80. So it's still good. You can survive off that and you can thrive off of that. And some farms will forget about making everything themselves. That way they can focus on growing veggies or raising animals, whatever it is. And the other big note about buying in blocks, I'd like to say, is that it offers a lot less control over the process, and you also have to kind of plan out you buy enough blocks to last you a month. They only last about a month, maybe two, before you really drop how much you can harvest from them. So you got to plan ahead, just how to ration them throughout the month to have your consistent sales. And then, you also have to store your blocks in cooler space, which is going to be much more expensive, and you're probably going to have less of it compared to storing just the raw materials for making your own blocks, which can be at room temperature, it can be vertical, just in pallets and stuff. So just other things to note. And then kind of going down in our profit margins, just having the labor go on somebody else. We go from buying mushrooms from somebody else completely, not even the blocks. These typically run from $6 to $8.50 a pound for oyster mushrooms. I do this, it's saved my butt multiple times when things just really weren't working, when I had to move my farm. I was just buying in mushrooms, paying about $7 to $8.50 a pound. Your margin gets real slim here. It goes down to 15 to 40%. And 40% is still good. 15, especially considering all the things that are not being calculated here, can be a little tight. So if your cash flow is pretty steady and readily available, this could make sense for you still. You just have to turn over the mushrooms very fast. Whereas, growing them yourself, you pick it, it's got some life to it. You don't have to sell it right away. These were already picked. You don't even know when they were picked, so they might not last super long. And you got to make sure that your volume of sales is, pretty steady and adequate for this stuff. Otherwise, you're going to be buying expensive mushrooms and sometimes letting them rot. That's a big loss there. So, but in a pinch, it's definitely super useful. Good to be connected with larger farms in your area, in your region. It's good to have a safety net like this. And I also like to be honest with my chefs. I'm like, hey, this week, half the mushrooms you're getting, I bought from another farm. I know them. It's good, high quality product. Just so you're aware, I don't like to lie to my customers. That's definitely, the biggest risk is, not being an honest business person. So, and I have not had any of my chefs just, drop me because I'm giving them somebody else's product. Most people have been quite understanding. So, equipment, fun toys. So these are my wish list on my wish list every Christmas. We got the auto baggers and semi-auto baggers. So I do everything by hand. It takes me about an hour and a half, sometimes up to 2, to make 40 10-pound blocks. And you can definitely automate it quite easily. It's just going to be a big upfront cost. On the left, you have a big, it's kind of like just a hopper with kind of like an auger in the middle, and everything goes in there, all your pellets, there's like a hose in there, so it puts in the correct amount of water, churns it all up, and then you put the wet substrate into your bags and then into your sterilizer. So these are big. They come, typically from China. You can find them on Alibaba. Usually run around like 2 to 4K. Obviously, it's size dependent, but they're kind of the most expensive option, I think. In the middle and on the right, kind of the same thing going on. One's obviously a little higher build quality. It's metal. The other is more DIY. You could even potentially make it yourself. So in the middle, it's Myers Mushrooms. He's got a big YouTube account, nice shop on his website. So he sells these, I think, for like maybe like 2,000, something like that, 1,500, 2,000. And it's like a split hopper. So one side you put your wood pellets in, one side you put your soy pellets in, and then you use that pedal on the bottom to control the pneumatics. The dry stuff goes into your bag, which kind of just slips into that middle tube like a sock. And then you press another button and that puts the right amount of water in. And then you fold it up, put it in your sterilizer. Same exact thing with the wooden version. It's just a little bit cheaper. That one is Mossy Creek mushrooms out in Tennessee. So they sell those for, I think, like, I want to say maybe a little less than 1,000, maybe up to 1,500. I don't, sorry, I don't have the exact numbers, but these are definitely in decreasing cost order. And you can potentially build that yourself if you're handy. So, and then the next set of goodies is in inoculation. So that takes me about 2 to 2.5 hours, a little bit longer, a little bit more strain on just kind of, my arms, crushing up all the, after you sterilize your box, they're like vacuum sealed. So you have to kind of break it up a little bit. It could be a lot of work for some people. So, to kind of reduce the amount of labor in this process, there are these band sealers. So I guess what I do is kind of a little bit more lackluster is I open up the bag, put my spawn in, and then I drop it down and use like just kind of like almost like a scissor clamp type thing. It is an impulse sealer and it just kind of melts the plastic and seals it up. In this case, you put your bag standing up on the conveyor belt, and then it just slide it in and it makes a nice thick band sealed. And this is how like the professional farms like to do it. It's not going to break, it's not going to pop because the seal is so sturdy. And then it can drop into one of these 3 things. So these are just different types of mixers. So Unicorn Bag is the brand of plastic bag that I use and a lot of other mushroom farms use. They make a shaker that is meant for these bags so they don't burst. Sometimes even just shaking them by hand, you might burst the seal if you don't have a good sealer. I don't have the price on that thing, but I assume it works pretty well. There's also some really homemade versions. This is a basic dryer that you have in your house. So pretty much you take the heating element out, or you buy one with a broken heater, and you put some foam in the center, and you just have some paddles or something in there, and you can throw the bags right in there, and that mixes your substrate and your spawn to have a homogeneous mixture. Some people will do it with corrugated plastic tubes. What's nice about that is you can have it go from your lab through the wall into your incubation chamber, and you just put it in there and it rolls slowly, churning, and then falls out into your incubation chamber. Somebody else is there to pick it up, label it, and put it on a shelf. And that's real efficient workflow. And then lastly, I think we talked about this a little bit last time, just different types of sterilizers. Your smallest, most beginner stage is just your pressure cooker. They go really fast because it is a pressurized vessel, but they're really small always, and you can only fit like a handful of blocks in there at a time, maybe up to 10, something like that. I use something similar to what you see in the center. I got a modified 85-gallon stainless steel drum from Bubba's Barrels, also in Tennessee. Mine is insulated, has some electronics to it. really nice. That was about $3,000, including freight. Um, just as a price point. Then they range in size anywhere from 55 to 150 gallons. In my 85 gallon, like I said, I can fit about 40 10-pound blocks at a time. And some people make them themselves. It's not pressurized, so you're not going to make a bomb, but sometimes, you might have a heater, get busted and melt stuff. There's some fire or electrical risk for sure if you do it yourself. And then lastly, again, from like Alibaba, they have these autoclaves. I believe those are pressurized as well. So maybe a little bit faster than the atmospheric steam barrel. These are only for really huge operations. Again, what's nice is some people have them built between rooms, go through a wall. So you don't have to like cart anything into a lab. You open one end, put the stuff in. When it's done sterilizing, you open the other end in your lab, cart everything out, and it never has to touch like non-sterile air. So it's an advantage there, but that's definitely maybe down the line for most of us. And then next section, sales channels. So I came into this business wanting to just work with restaurants. I maybe got a few months of that before COVID hit. Then I switched over to mostly grocery stores. I have kept a few grocery stores and mostly do restaurants now. And then I do the farmers markets in the summer, and as well as I do a little bit of direct to consumer. Definitely did more so as everyone was early in lockdown. I do a CSA, and there's trade-offs for each of these for sure. So restaurants, definitely, I wanted to kind of show the world how amazing specialty mushrooms were. And I was like, I think restaurants are going to be the way to help create these trends of, people discovering a new food that they like and then wanting to learn more or how to cook it themselves. So, typically it's going to be higher end restaurants with specialty mushrooms, but chances are they will be very happy to see your products. You want to definitely aim for perfect with these high-end chefs, but you will be rewarded for it. If I have some less than pretty mushrooms, some chefs don't care. That's fine. Some chefs I give a deal to, like a B grade mushroom gets a discount. And sometimes I just, will dehydrate the mushroom, or, if it's really just not savable, I'll compost it. But, I never try to cut corners. I only give them, the nicest thing that I can find, and they appreciate it. So, it's important to get on your chef's good sides for sure, because in a small community like here in Northern Vermont, everyone in the restaurant industry knows each other to some degree, or has heard of each other. There's a lot of people swapping between restaurants. So, chefs will talk, and for me, it has, ended up pretty well, where sometimes chefs will reach out to me because they heard something good, or, I've seen, that they can trust me because I work with other chefs. Those first few chefs that I worked with were maybe taking a leap of faith a little bit with me. So, it's just important to, be on their good side. The way I get in touch with chefs is typically I would do it through Instagram. I'll follow the restaurant, but then I'll also try to find the chef's personal account, and schmooze them a little bit. But I'll direct message them. Sometimes you can get away with directly messaging the restaurant, either on Facebook or Instagram, or calling them to try to get the chef's personal email. You always want to use them as a stepping stone to talk with the chef, either to make an appointment or just to get their number or email. Two things I don't do are I don't walk in unannounced. Some people will probably argue against that. Some people do like that. I don't really know when the perfect time is. I don't know their schedules, or if the restaurant will even be unlocked. So I just don't risk it. And it's worked out fine for me. And I also don't email the restaurants just basic inquiry page on every restaurant's website. It's almost always a dead end for me. I just never hear back because they probably are flooded with reservation emails or something like that. So next, we got the grocery stores and distributors and food hubs, stuff like that. So, you know, you got your wholesale base price. Obviously, you have to put it in your packaging costs, the labor to pack stuff, which sometimes can be quite a bit. Your boxes, your labels, and everything. So, um, you know, your price point might have to be a little bit lower sometimes, because they operate on very slim margins. But what's nice is that they tend to be more reliable than restaurants, especially like, you know, like I said, I switched to a lot of grocery stores in the early pandemic, and it was really nice having that reliability of, you know, people have to go to grocery stores, people don't have to go to restaurants. So it was a little bit less money for that kind of peace of mind. So it's important to, you know, figure out the packaging that works for you. If you're in a big city or have like a really popular health food store you can get into, you can get away with kind of a prettier cardboard packaging, but you need to expect that the shelf life will be a lot lower on those. Not that the mushrooms will rot, but because they'll dry out and people will, you know, can still use them, but they don't think that they can. So they usually should stay on the shelves and never get sold. So I, unfortunately, you know, I do use plastic. It's recycled plastic. I don't love it, but in a pandemic economy, people do appreciate the plastic containers. This is stuff that my grocery stores have told me, and it can help the mushrooms stay on the shelves longer, which is always, you know, just a benefit for everyone. So. And then labeling, you know, you'd be eye-catching. You also wanted to follow your labeling laws. I write a little warning on mine that says, you know, packed in a facility that handles soy, just in case of like an allergy thing. I've never had any complaints about any of my mushrooms, grocery stores or restaurants, but, you know, I try to cover my bases. Next is the farmer's market. You know, you do lose your Saturdays for, you know, whatever it is, 15, 20 weeks. But sometimes it ends up being real fun. You make a lot of good connections with other farmers and producers. You know, you get, it's a little invigorating, you know, you're running sales and everything. So I like to have a little pitch. You know, I see a lot of people walk by, do like a little slow walk and kind of give me the side eye. And then I kind of just have to tell them to come by, you know, come closer, come, you know, I can tell you a little bit about what I'm selling here. And then I find it's really important to kind of anchor them in some sense of familiarity. So they might not know what the mushrooms we're selling are, but they know portobellos, they know shiitakes. So, you know, I say you can use this one similar to a portobello, put it on the grill. You know, people love that, you know, with like Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day. You know, those are big sales weekends for the market in the summer, and people, you know, want to grill. So mushrooms can be used for that. Just, you know, kind of give some recipe ideas, and, you know, usually it ends up well. And I've had a lot of people come back and be like, wow, I'm really glad you convinced me to buy them. Like I really fell in love with these mushrooms. And then you got a customer for the rest of the summer. So, and maybe the next year too. Really important to have an attractive display. Some people will give out like free beverages. You know, it's little things. You know, just a little jug of water with some lemons in it. People always appreciate that on a summer day. You know, vertical displays will always fill the space and draw the eye more. I think it's a pretty simple display. I bought those crates at Michael's, but you flip them and all of a sudden you have people complimenting how pretty it is. And also I always like to, if I have a block in my fruiting room ready to go, like you see in the bottom picture, or somewhere in the process of growing, I'll bring that as a centerpiece. Kids love it. People love seeing how they grow. And if you sell grow kits, it's also just a kind of good example of how to use them. So direct to consumer, we have some online communities. You know, you can find stuff on Facebook groups for sure, wherever you are. We have this thing called Front Porch Forum. Typically, just anyone who's not using Instagram, well, you know, you might be able to connect you with something like that. So, you know, I've done everything from delivering to somebody's door just based off of a Facebook sale to setting up an actual CSA, getting like an email list going, which is huge. If you're into that sort of thing, can be really profitable. What's nice about direct sales and farmers market sales is you can mark them up way higher since your quantity you sell them in is much smaller. So I go from $10 wholesale to about $15 to $20 a pound. And then, with the CSA, it gives you good ease of mind. You can predict how much you need to produce. You don't need to worry about, especially with COVID, like my restaurants will, maybe suddenly drop off the sales. No, and the CSA, people have prepaid for 10 to 20 weeks in advance. And, you should be all set there. You just have to know how to manage that cash flow because you get it all up front. So, a big part of marketing thing that I racked my brain over was, how do I differentiate? Because mushroom genetics are very similar all over the world. It's hard to say like, I grew these mushrooms better than that other farm. Chances are, as soon as they were picked, they look about the same or pretty similar. The only thing is that those big farms, those mega farms in Pennsylvania, California, out in Asia, the only thing that they're really good at besides growing a large amount of mushrooms is packaging them in, like, they ship them in ways that will keep them fresh looking for as long as possible. So they use high tech, advanced technology, like, getting rid of all the oxygen in a container, putting nitrogen or something in there to keep them fresh. But the thing is, once they sit on the shelves or go to a restaurant, the mushrooms do begin to discolor and lose their texture because they've been picked and sitting for weeks sometimes at that point. Whereas your biggest advantage is that you have freshness on your side. I've had so many chefs just kind of be like so impressed that I can pick a mushroom and get it to them sometimes the same exact day. I go to them and say, this is the freshest mushroom you're ever going to eat besides picking something in the woods. That they will definitely really appreciate that. It really kind of creates that connection of local agriculture that people look for these days. So social media, there's a decent bit on here. And I don't use all of these for the farm. I mostly use Instagram, but I think that there are advantages and disadvantages to each popular platform. So Instagram is really heavily trafficked. You'll definitely find tons of people to advertise to. You can pay for targeted ads. I wrote your mileage may vary for that. It really is dependent on how much money you want to put in. Sometimes it is also, you'd end up breaking even. So I don't do it too much. But it's great for local connections. Like I said, most of my restaurants I've connected with through Instagram, and also broader connections with just other farms, other producers. You learn things from other people, you teach things, and also collaborations. I've done contests with local producers just to kind of get some good advertising like that, a lot of followers real fast like that, and it just kind of creates a sense of community. Disadvantages, because it's so heavily trafficked, it's hard to stick out. You really have to post, you have to time your posts. You have to you can do research on this too about how to work with the Instagram algorithm, and to get the most bang for your buck, you have to post very regularly. Before, I would do it every single day. I go on it every single day. Sometimes I'll just, interact and, message other people or comment. I don't post every day anymore just because I feel like I'm a little bit more stable with my sales now. Facebook, really good for just local connections, a lot of local groups. Instagram has younger people. Typically, Facebook has a lot kind of more of an older demographic, but therefore typically wealthier. So sometimes you get, people who are really into your products, but they're only on Facebook. And you can do targeted ads as well on there, and they have their own marketplace for direct sales or advertising, which is nice. So I guess the big disadvantage of Facebook is it's also kind of hard to go viral, hard for things to spread fast on there, as opposed to Instagram. TikTok, I really love TikTok just on a personal level. I do a little bit of business advertising there. And if you go really hard with TikTok, I think it would be extremely rewarding, because it's large and it's continuing to grow, and the algorithm is so sophisticated. It really helps you find your target audience, and it's really easy to go viral relative to the other platforms. But it's a lot of work. You have to post very regularly. Um, the paid promotions on there are a little bit weaker. So your own content kind of has to promote itself, with that. And the caveat there is you have to not do it in a very fake way. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with TikTok, and a lot of people are starting to get into it, as far as a business strategy. So it's just something to research about. This whole slide could probably be its own presentation, in all honesty. And then lastly, Twitter. So I don't really use Twitter too much for my business, but it's great to form community because you can interact with followers really easily. And you can also build kind of that local and broader partnerships quite easy. And people feel like your business is like more in the loop with things, I guess. But it is more harder to stick out because your followers might be following, hundreds or thousands of people. So, it takes some time to build a brand on Twitter, but it can also, all these have their own rewards with them. So, and then one of the last marketing things, yes, newspapers. I've had some nice sales surges from my newspaper articles. I've only had a couple, but one was right before the holidays about my grow kits, and it really blew up my grow kit sales. This was like 2020, and then I had an article last spring that was kind of advertising my PSA. That really helped kind of, it was right after I moved as well, so it was in that new town, and it just kind of helped me kind of get some footing in that new community. So again, kind of an wealthier demographic, and you can definitely ride the momentum of a newspaper article. Once you get that surge, you can collect emails, get a newsletter going, and you can really, that can be really advantageous for you. And then we got local farm organizations. This was really nice to have in the beginning, for sure. We have a couple, like one is the Vermont Fresh Network that I'm a part of. So that it's a group of farmers and producers, and also restaurants, and I think some grocery stores or food hubs that pretty much they vow to use X percentage of their produce and food products will be local. So they have their own mixers and stuff like that. Really good to kind of meet other businesses and buyers. You can even find people who work for the organization whose job it is to connect you with clients. So, when you get started, you definitely just, want to use whatever connections you can get. And I think our first sale, it was to a brewery that a friend worked at. They used our mushrooms in a cask ale, and it didn't turn into anything like a long-term sales relationship, but it was really exciting and fun, and just was something nice to like post about and advertise. So it was just kind of use whatever connections you can. So competitors, this is the last section. Are they friends or are they foes? I get a lot of people these days asking for kind of free farm tours, or trying to just get all my trade secrets pretty much for free. And not that I don't hold any animosity towards newcomers. I just think that you need to figure out like, how do you want to work with other people in your area who are trying to sell the same exact thing. So as the industry grows, you're going to see more of this, and I think that you can kind of fulfill a niche as becoming a supplier for some of these people. Instead of just trying to screw another business, which usually never ends well, you can try to become their block supplier, help make spawn for them, or even sell them mushrooms if they're in a pinch, or they can do that for you. Or there's some just mutually beneficial advantages, like splitting pallets if you're getting freight shipped in, or like I said, in emergencies you can help each other. If you make your own spawn, you can swap genetics. Other collabs, like splitting kitchen spaces for value-added products. So there are other ways to deal with competitors besides just being upset about it and grumpy. And you can differentiate easily. There's grow kits. I like to sell those. That's pictured at the bottom. That's a pink oyster mushroom grow kit. Right now all the holiday ones got sent out and people are getting excited about getting those started. There's medicinal mushrooms in the top left. That's a cordyceps, really popular medicinal, starting to get really, a lot of people starting to do that, and it's quite easy to grow. And then there's other varieties you can stick out with. None of them grow quite as fast or are as desirable as oyster mushrooms, but they definitely help you stick out and can be quite profitable by themselves. Nameko, maitake, coral toots, piopino, etc. You can read about all those in various grow books. I forage, and I also will buy from other foragers. I'll import or purvey wild mushrooms. So there's like chanterelles in the top right. People absolutely go crazy for that stuff at farmers markets. If you're foraging yourself, you can probably sell them wholesale. If you're buying them in, your margins will probably be a little too low to make like good money off of then selling them wholesale. So I try to keep it just in the farmers markets. But yeah, I just got truffles right before Christmas, imported from Italy, and I had a few chefs just want them, but it's a good profit, and people are really impressed by holding a little thing in their hand that costs almost $1,000. It's nice for for me. I like being that guy who can help my chefs in any way, and I can get them cool products like that. Some value added stuff in the bottom left, that's old blocks that are sitting in compost. Some people will buy those blocks and kind of make their own garden beds to grow mushrooms. I help educate people on that. I sell them for real cheap or give bulk deals, or you can potentially amend it with other products to create your own bagged soil, compost. There's a lot of cool things you can do with it. It's got tons of nutrition still in it. In the top middle, there's a mushroom jerky that I made for a little bit. I don't have the time or space for like a big jerky operation, but it was a huge hit, and I might get back to it at some point soon. Those are just kind of medicinal mushrooms in the bottom middle. Making tinctures, medicinal powders, getting really popular these days. And a lot of the big companies that do it are kind of a little fake or maybe a little sketchy. So some people do look for kind of smaller local suppliers that they can trust. There's on the right is a collaboration I did with a chef. We made lion's mane shribs or mushroom ribs. Just he cooked them up and did like a barbecue sauce, and it was like extremely delicious. Again, it was just kind of something we couldn't get totally off the ground because of kitchen space, but if that's something that you have accessible, there's a lot of cool products you can do with mushrooms that are value added. So kind of getting towards the wrap up now. Mushroom industry as of the end of 2021 going into 22. In 2020, mushrooms were in top 3 best performing foods in grocery stores, and demand is on the rise. Global mushroom industry is predicted to nearly double by 2028. And that's only set like what is it, 6 years. So that's quite fast growth right there. And I think this is maybe a little anecdotal, but I do think that interest in mushrooms is growing as a whole. Everyone is telling me about Fantastic Fungi, which they saw on Netflix. Books are coming out. I think interest in fungi in general is absolutely on the rise, and it's not going anywhere because it's been on the rise for decades and continues to be. So kind of on the less exciting part, but also maybe opportunistic here, is that the industry as a whole is very centralized in Pennsylvania. So the US mushroom industry, 60% of mushrooms, mostly of button mushrooms, and it's called agaricus. So that's button mushrooms, crimini, portobellos, it's all the same thing. 60% of them come from one county in Pennsylvania. One of the most centralized industries in the US, I think. They're seeing huge issues with supply chain, getting blocks shipped in from China, or raw materials, lumber or peat moss is one of the big ones. There's also big labor shortages. As it says, labor is down 20%. We can't harvest all the mushrooms at the correct time. Pietro Industries is a big farm in Pennsylvania. I know one of the issues is that mushroom farms, since they're year round, they can't get, I think, like workers who are coming just on a visa just to work at a farm. Veggie farms get that. Mushroom farms, I think, are not, that doesn't apply to them. And it's rough work in those big farms. There's risks and everything. So I don't, some people just don't want to do it, and labor is starting to go down. But like I said, there's opportunities here for us small guys. Decentralizing might be bad for these big farms, but it could be good for us little guys. One anecdote that stuck out to me was I was talking with a chef. I wasn't able to fulfill some of his orders. He said he could get some commodity mushrooms, which more often than not come from Pennsylvania. But he said that pretty much the way it's been looking more recently is that if he can't get mushrooms from me, he just can't get them at all. Shiitake has gone up in price because the supply is so low. So, that was kind of my big alarm that, like, hey, like, the opportunity is open. Like, if not them, then it's going to be me, or it could be you guys. It could be any small farm popping up locally. So there's some advantages here moving forward as the demand stays high, but supply starts to see some issues. So just to wrap things up, I think that like I said in the beginning, running a mushroom farm is extremely rewarding. You get really nice response from customers, chefs, people at farmers markets. It's always really pleasant to hear people say, like, wow, this was the best mushroom I've ever eaten. This is the prettiest one I've ever seen. And then also knowing that, specialty mushrooms, are definitely part of the circular economy, especially if your own waste is going to somewhere, it's not just going to a landfill. If it's going to somebody's garden, another farm, if your bags are biodegradable or reusable, there's, a lot of, kind of just, you feel good about stuff like that. And when challenges do arise, inevitably, there are mentors out there. There are lots of books, social networks on all over Facebook. There's tons of grower groups, and countless videos at this point on YouTube, to the point where you have to kind of even sift a little bit through the nonsense. But there's lots of resources out there for advice and troubleshooting. A really good book about just kind of keeping things efficient at your farm is The Lean Farm. It's based off of lean business practices, which I believe came from Japan. It's just all about waste and how to prevent it. So, I think it's important to always be on the lookout for inefficiency, to not get complacent. I've caught myself thinking, like, when I explain my process to somebody, I'm like, well, I guess it's just like this because I've always done it like that. But, all of a sudden I realized, no, like, I should have been doing it some way else. I just have gotten complacent, or I've gotten used to it. So, to make more profits, pretty much this book argues that you don't need to necessarily get bigger, forever. You can just at some point choose to grow more efficient. and it's absolutely true. You know, getting more mushrooms out of your substrate, out of your blocks, and everything. And you know, the industry is growing. I think it's definitely going to keep growing. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. So if you want to get into mushroom farming, you know, the best time is now for sure. And there's just a little pup wearing some of our FUNJ merch. Good model. Let's see, stop share. So yeah, I guess we can open things up to questions, right? Just like last time. I'm surprised that we landed right at 7:30, right at where I wanted to land. But yeah, ready to take any questions if people got them.
Kevin, where are the 226 farms that you talked about early on? Are they,
Did you ask where they are?
yeah, I mean, are they equally spaced across the US or an inordinate number in Pennsylvania?
I would definitely, I don't have the answer for you, unfortunately. What I can say is, you know, something like 66% of mushrooms in the US come from Pennsylvania. They're definitely, most of the farms I see are closer to big cities and stuff. Here in Vermont, I think there's really only a couple of us that are, you know, none of us are huge. You know, we're in the, you know, maybe a couple 100 pounds a week sort of range. And then, you know, as you get closer to Boston or New York, you see a lot more mushrooms. There is a push. I worked with a grant that was trying to push for more farms growing in the Northeast. And then I think 14% of the mushroom supply in the US comes from California. So yeah, you know, sometimes I feel like here there's only so many buyers, only so many people who can buy mushrooms. When you're somewhere like New York or but just by like a big city in general, I think you might not have that issue. You know, our biggest city is only like 50,000 people. So, you know, if you're by a city with millions of people in it and tons of restaurants and grocery stores, I would be a lot less worried about competition and the lack of sales channels, as opposed to if I saw like another farm open up right by me.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of interested in that number as well. Do you know what the criteria is? What separates an official mushroom farm from just more of a hobby farm? It seems like a pretty low number.
Sometimes the number can be very low. I can look into this more and send out an email with whatever information I can gather based off of like criteria. Like I think generally like 100 pounds a week is like a pretty good criterion for you know, this is actually a farm. And even then it's a fairly small one. It's not like anything crazy. You know, and then there are a lot of people who, so I guess I'll say like most mushroom farms I see that are small are not solely dedicated to mushrooms. Oftentimes it's people who run logs in their woods, just growing shiitake or stuff like that, or have a small little operation somewhere indoors. So yeah, I can try to look at that source that I got that from and do a little digging there, because you're right, it is a small number.
How many square feet do you have in your operation? With the background or what?
Originally, my first, like it was a garage pretty much, was maybe like 700 square feet, and that's everything. You know, the whole shebang. Now it's a little closer to like 1,200 or something like that. My fruiting room is only 100 square feet. It's a very small room, and I've impressed myself and I've impressed other growers with how much yield I can get out of a little room like that. Because that was one of the like beautiful things that really drove me to start mushroom farming, was that you can do it vertically, and that you can make little tiny spaces be very productive. But I will say that I think I've very much underestimated how much space I would need. I think my initial plans, I thought I would only need, a few hundred square feet. And then I would, I got a larger garage, and I was very happy that it ended up being larger. I had some very big oversights, I think.
What would you say are some of like the big things to look out for as far as something like an event that could like wipe out your whole crop or that kind of thing? Like I know mold is an issue. Are there other things people should be aware of in terms of big
Yeah,
disruptions?
Yeah, and definitely, I would recommend people go back to reference the first presentation. So bacterial blotch is the worst for me. And for those of you who are in warmer environments, that's something you're gonna have to learn how to deal with. So mushrooms like it cool and humid, but with also lots of fresh air turnover. So in the woods, they don't really get these infections because there's so much fresh air. But in a little space like ours, too much humidity and too much heat becomes stagnant, and bacteria starts to grow on, pretty much any surface that it can. And when you have everything blotched, it's like a bacteria that makes your mushrooms die off when they're babies, and they turn slimy and orange. And sometimes you can pick them off and then hope that your second flush is more resistant. That's like something that other farmers and myself have noticed. But you can definitely wipe out a lot of your crop, or at least you have to spend a lot of time trimming off the bad stuff from whatever you can save. So it's more labor and it's still a lot of waste. So, I think in the other presentation, I do talk about how to prevent it, but just like briefly again, keeping things really cool, 55 to 62 degrees Fahrenheit is the range I prefer. Letting things dry out after the humidity reaches its upper point, whatever, like 89% relative humidity, let it dry down to like 70%, or I do 72%. Because if it's just constantly wet, that's just sitting water is your enemy. You need humidity, but you don't want sitting water. So you want things to dry out a little bit. And then also just air circulation and keeping whatever is circulating your air clean. And keeping the air that is going into your humidifier clean as well, because like my humidifier is like a tote of water that sits in my fruiting room with a little mister in there that turns it into fog. And before, I would just recycle the air in my fruiting room, and it would get so dirty so fast. But I was worried that if I brought dry air in from outside the fruiting room to like blow the mist out, that it would keep things too dry. I was wrong. It actually keeps things just as humid and keeps the water a lot cleaner. So it's not a breeding ground at that point. So yeah, definitely those are the biggest things I've learned. It happens for sure. Every farm sees it. You want to just cull the mushrooms early on. And I guess not to like keep dragging this out, but the other thing that some farms struggle with, thankfully I have not, is trichoderma mold. So this happens right after inoculation. Typically you'll see it in the incubation room. And that's almost always caused by not being careful when you're inoculating. You want to use tons of isopropyl to just sanitize everything, every surface. overkill is fine. I'd rather waste more alcohol than, you know, end up with, you know, half my batch getting moldy. Proper spawn storage. You know, I've had spawn that I let sit too warm, and somehow trichoderma was just, you know, able to take hold there. So yeah, definitely those two are the big killers, I'd say.
Would those be something that someone like in their first year of growing would expect, or is it rare enough that you wouldn't really need to incorporate that into your projections as a beginning farmer?
I think it's always safe to incorporate it. I think I was surprised with how little I saw trichoderma, the green mold, in my blocks. I sometimes see it every now and then, but oyster mushrooms are so vigorous and so easy to grow that often they'll just beat out the trichoderma before. I think the blotch, especially in the summer months, you should plan to be losing some percentage to it. I think I don't have an exact number because, you know, it'll vary depending on what the conditions are at your farm are, but you know, I think it's expected to be seen. So yeah, you know, I just invested in a 2-ton mini split to keep the little chamber around my fruiting room cool next summer. Hopefully it'll, you know, stay in the 60s. And then, you know, some people will also try to like experiment with different mushroom strains. Some are more resistant to blotch, but might give you a less productive mushroom in general. So then it's kind of, you have to do your own yield calculations. Should I grow the mushroom that grows me less pounds per block, but is less likely to get lost entirely to bacterial blotch? Or should I grow the mushroom that is going to give me a lot more mushrooms if it's done right, but is a lot more risky? So yeah, I like winter. I don't like winter. The mushrooms like winter because I can just turn my heater just a tiny bit up, you know, in my warehouse. I keep it in the 50s all winter. I can handle it. I don't mind it. And the mushrooms, everything's just much cleaner, you know. I'm spending less time cleaning, and the mushrooms, the colors are better when it's cold. So keeping things cool is always good with mushroom farming. But I do know of very successful farms like all the way down in Florida. So
How steep would you say that learning curve is when you are first starting to grow mushrooms to kind of notice things that are going wrong with the mushroom, to see, you know, if you need to take it out, or, you know, you mentioned like B grade mushrooms, just the quality of mushrooms. Is that something that it takes a while to kind of train your eyes on to what to look for, or?
No, I don't think so. I think the first time I saw bacterial blotch, and I was like, huh, these mushrooms are like kind of weird shaped, and like there's like glistening brown like droplets coming out of them. Is this normal? And I would send it to like some, you know, friends and mentors of mine, and they'd be like, you know, they'd tell me exactly what it was, and then you just have an eye for it after that. I think the biggest thing that people have trouble with is differentiating the different species of oyster mushrooms. You know, like a phoenix or brown oyster versus a blue oyster. I can tell somebody there's a mix of mushrooms in this box, and sometimes they just won't be able to tell them apart. But I think it's not a very steep learning curve for trying to just gauge what is a good looking mushroom versus like what is a bad one. I think sometimes maybe I'm a little too picky because I see, you know, I guess I just hold myself to a high standard, and then like I'll see the mushrooms that somebody else is selling, or the mushrooms that maybe a chef will buy in from like a large distributor, and like they're so bad they're not even my B grade mushrooms, you know? So sometimes I'm a little harsh on my own standards, but I don't think it's hard to find what works for you, and what is like how to gauge things.
Do you find the grocery stores that you sell to, do they have certain standards and grading for the mushrooms they're buying from you, or is it more?
No, most of them are buying clamshells from me, so it's just like the pack is the pack, and sometimes like if it sits for a little too long, like maybe like once you're in the 5 to 7 day range, stuff starts to dry out a little bit, and they'll maybe like put like a sale on it just to move it. I've had some grocery stores, you know, will ask me if I'm okay with that. You know, because some farms don't want their products to be even seen and like clearance, which is understandable. So I always just make sure to have my grocery store buyers like, I'd rather have them buy less from me than buy, you know, more that ends up looking bad. You know, I want everything that has my label on it to be looking good until they're sold out. But yeah, generally, even like with the stores around me that do bulk specialty mushrooms, even though they don't really grade their mushrooms, sometimes a chef might want to grade truffles. That's a thing. I haven't encountered it, but I have heard of it. Just because once you're dealing with that much money, you know, and you know, an ounce of like, you know, truffle that was carved out by like a worm that got to it, you know, really affects things. So, but not a huge issue for what I sell.
I have a quick question for Catherine. Where are these videos, these recordings, if we wanted to access them?
Great question. I can share them with you directly, but eventually they'll be living on a new website that we're launching, which is called the Farmer Toolkit. So Kevin's videos, as well as the extra resources he sent in the email, as well as some of the other resources we've been gathering, are all going to eventually live on a farmer focused website. But in the meantime, I'm happy to just send them to you.
Okay, cool.
Another thought popped into my mind, because you know I could ramble about this stuff forever, but about the B grade stuff, you know, this kind of ties into having a good relationship with your chefs, to the point where, you know, I like to give holiday presents to the people who I work with, show my appreciation. So with people who you feel like you have a really good, honest relationship with, I tell them straight up, like, I can't get you top quality mushrooms, but I do have B grades. I can give you a good deal on them, because I trust that they won't judge my other products based on that. Because of them, and they know this, and I'll have a stockpile of, you know, pounds of dry mushrooms, and then they'll want to buy all the dry mushrooms to turn into like powder, which is you know, really popular amongst like vegan chefs and also non-vegan chefs, just as like a flavor enhancer. So you know, sometimes, you know, honesty can really get you some you know, more sales there. You know, if I wasn't, you know, honest about the dry mushrooms, I probably wouldn't have ever even known that I could do that, known that I could still get some, not have to throw those things in the compost, you know?
I guess what percentage do you think of your mushrooms would you say are B grade?
At this point, I'm lucky to say that I sell out of everything I grow or every mushroom that I get like every week. So I'd say like none right now. You know, I'm also not trying to like keep growing too much more. I'm trying to find like a stable point. So some weeks it's maybe like 10 pounds out of like the 120 that I grew or something like that. I'd say like 10% is really the high end of like a lot of restaurants just closed because of COVID and these mushrooms can't move anywhere. And then, I don't have anything to do with them, so I'll dry them before they start actually going bad. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Sorry if I went on.
Well, I guess there you're saying about 10 pounds are that you don't have a place to sell them, so you're drying them out, or 10 pounds
Yeah.
are just kind of not high quality.
Oh, like how much ends up being just B grade from the get-go?
Yeah.
Oh, I gotcha. I'd say like in the middle of summer when blotch is really bad, it could be a little high. It could be like a quarter of the mushrooms or something. Yeah, I don't have like an exact number on like how much is B grade from the get-go because I usually like will do like a lot of trimming. But if everything's going well, most are born A grade, and really again it's just the freshness thing where like if they've sat for a week in your cooler, the texture is a little bit loose, like softer, they turn into B grade, and then it's like just as each mushroom ages. I will also say that in the first presentation I talked about harvest time. So if you harvest your mushrooms when they're really big, you might be able to like get a lot of money, a little bit extra poundage there in the beginning, but they'll also go bad a lot faster. So if you need stuff to sit a little bit longer and keep that top quality price point, you want to harvest them when they're a little bit younger and keep their firmness longer at that point.
How important do you think it is for you to have like product in hand when you're talking with those chefs or new buyers? Like, do they usually want to see it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I know some people who will have a couple of boxes of mushrooms and just go downtown and like stop into every restaurant and do their pitch, and just like if it goes well, they're like, hey, I got mushrooms right here. Since I don't do a lot of like cold walk-ins, I will have a pound of mushrooms, maybe a pound or two, ready as just like a sample, just on the house, just to give them, because they might look gorgeous, but I want them to try it out, see how it works in their recipes. So the first time I go visit a chef, unless they are placing like a preliminary order, I will always have free samples for them for sure.
Does anyone else have any questions? I think we're, you know, about at time, so.
Yeah, if y'all are ready to wrap up, I appreciate everyone's time. It's been fun.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kevin. This has been really helpful. And I will just say that I think a lot of the pieces of your presentation, especially regarding, the outreach, trying to find buyers and the labeling and packaging and that kind of thing, those are all things that our team can help each of you farmers with, when you get to that stage. So definitely if, thinking about social media and that kind of thing made you a little bit nervous, just be comforted that our team can certainly help with those kinds of things. And our corporate team that many of y'all have worked with already, that's their skill set. And, we'd be happy to assist in any of those pieces, whether it's still in the planning stage or, once you get growing, actually implementing some of those. So no need to be intimidated by those pieces. But yeah, if there's no more questions, thanks so much, Kevin. Thanks to all of you for, devoting your time this evening. And like I said, I'll share the recording and also the email that Kevin sent with I think it was some book and YouTube recommendations. I'll share that with everyone. And eventually we will have a mushroom section on our new website. So that will be exciting to see as well. And of course, any of y'all are welcome to reach out to Kevin independently with any of your questions. And as you know, he's an expert on this topic. So definitely feel free to reach out if anything comes up.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Yeah, absolutely. Just feel free to